Roma versus AC Milan, second leg of the Europa League quarterfinals. Two Americans starting this one, Christian Pulisic and Yunus Musah, down 1-0 going into the second leg in Rome. And they ended up losing, unfortunately, 2-1. So they're out 3-1 over aggregates. Both of the players got subbed out at the same time around the 69th, 70th minutes. So a double American sub from Stefano Pioli. Jesse, we talked a little bit before the show started. Pretty underwhelming performance, not only from Milan, but potentially our Americans as well.
Well, from Milan, a terrible, terrible match. Like from the start, Roma was all over the match. And, I mean, listen, it can sometimes work that way where it's a big game. You're really excited. You don't have the start that you want, but you've got to have the resolve and discipline in the team to stay after the game and keep pushing and go after it. And it was almost even after, okay, Milan had like 20 corner kicks and they were in the end, but man, it was a messy performance. Players all over the pitch, trying their own things, look like 11 individuals. Really, I mean, disappointing for Milan in such a big moment to have a performance like that. So, but it also for me highlights that Rome is in a really good way. And, I don't think De Rossi's done anything that sophisticated in terms of the tactics and the football that they're really trying to play, other than they look organized defensively and they look confident on the ball. And right now that's meant that they've had a lot of good results. They've made a run in this tournament, and now they play Leverkusen next, which I think right now in world football, the two teams that are really interesting to watch are Rome and Leverkusen. So that'll be a really good matchup. And then in terms of Pulisic and Musah, I thought it wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. You see that they're trying to do the right things and trying to help the team, but it was just a mess today. And it's hard to say that they had good performances. Anyone on the team had a good performance. I mean, even the moment when the goalkeeper from Milan, Mignon, traps the long ball and traps it out of bounds, right? Like this was the perfect moment for this performance. It was just a day where nothing went right for Milan and everything went right for Rome. So other than maybe Lukaku getting hurt, obviously that's not a great moment for Milan, but they're in a really good way. It'll be fun to watch as they continue to move on through this tournament.
Chuck, let's talk about Stefano Pioli's starting 11, because I feel like there was, or could be, an argument to be had about him having Christian Pulisic in the 10 spot and bringing Chukwueze on a little bit earlier, and having Leao, Pulisic, Chukwueze, and Giroud as your front four. They had success with that against Lecce, 10 days ago? And I wondered why we didn't see that really at any point, because I feel like it could have changed, or if they started that way, it could have changed how the game got played out.
Well, we did see a big change. I mean, Roma took the red card in the 31st minute when Celik tackled rough tackle on Leao, and Leao was lucky to escape injury. But he made a sub right away with Ismail Benacer. He took him off and brought Luka Jovic on, which that's when you can make the argument, is that the right player to bring on in that situation? Maybe it's a Chukwueze instead of a Luka Jovic in that situation. When you have Olivier Giroud as your striker, you don't need two of more or less a similar nine, where Chukwueze, you need players who are creative and can stretch the back line. So I think that's where Pioli might have gotten it wrong. And then, just starting Loftus-Cheek as the 10 and Benacer with Musah, you can always make that argument, is that the right trio in the midfield. But I'm going to back what Jesse said, that the Musah and Pulisic just didn't have great nights. And that, I think, coming into it, all eyes were on Christian to be the game changer, obviously with Rafael being the best player on the team. But Christian Pulisic has really stood out this season. And I think to have an American as a player highlighted as a game changer, someone who can win the tie for Milan, it's a lot of pressure to hold, especially when you're talking about the weight of the badge. And tonight, I think Roma made it super difficult to play. They were physical, and when they went down a man, they even tightened it more. So there was no room for really Christian Pulisic to move in and out of the midfield in those little half spaces. So it's just one of those nights where you go, damn, I just never really got going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when I think about Christian Pulisic, 3 goals and 1 assist in all of Europe this season. The 1 goal was against Newcastle in the Champions League group stages, and then 2 goals and an assist once they dropped down into the Europa League. With regarding Yunus Musah, there's obviously been some conversation about Yunus Musah not involved at all in leg 1, gets to start leg 2. But if you look back on how Pioli was using Musah, he actually started him in all the Champions League away games and in the 2 Europa League away games against Rennes and Slavia Prague. And that's, I guess, I don't know, superstition, or maybe just thought it was a better fit, a goal down, and that he could, with that ball progression, dribbling through midfield, could provide a different dynamic in the midfield for Milan, and obviously trying to make Roma counter in a different way. But Jesse, it just felt like none of the tactics that Pioli has been employing recently, because they're not that great a run of form, are really working right now. And to your point, Roma's looking fantastic. How does Milan salvage the rest of the season? Because on Monday they're taking on Inter in the Milan derby, and if Inter win that, then they win the Scudetto. So you don't want to lose to your biggest rivals and let them, win the league trophy in that game. They have nothing else to play for. They're not in the Coppa Italia anymore. They're really just fighting to get second. Where does Milan go from here?
Well, I think immediately they have to turn their attention to Monday, because the last thing they want is their rivals, Inter Milan, to win the title in San Siro against them. Like, that's obviously, they do not want to see this. So this becomes a huge match for them, because they're already qualified for Champions League. Given the results in Europe now, Italy has 5 spots. So there's no way that AC Milan can drop below. So they're already qualified for Champions League for next year. So that's still an achievement. But you're right. They're out of this. They're out of the Coppa Italia. They're now out of Europa League. The best thing they can do right now is prevent Inter from winning it at home, and still give them a chance to win the title. Although obviously they're far off at this point. And I have to also say, I mean, England, the Premier League, was one late goal from Villa and a penalty shootout away from not having any team in Champions League, Europa League, or Conference League semifinals. Think about that. Think about the disappointment for the teams from England this year in Europe. Incredible. And so, I mean, it says Germany's got 2 teams in the Champions League. Some of the Italian teams, Roma's done well. There's good performances across from a lot of the different leagues right now, other than the Premier League, which I don't think anyone would have expected before the season started.
Yeah, pretty remarkable, and a lot to talk about, a lot to unpack, I think, with the English clubs struggling in Europe this particular season. Now, Chuck, final thought on this subject. Stefano Pioli, the manager of AC Milan, if you look at where they were 32 games into the league season in Italy last year, they're actually 12 points ahead of that, but they crash out of the Champions League, kind of listless performance over 2 legs against a familiar opponent in Roma, who they've beaten twice in the league so far this season. Do you retain Pioli, or are you looking for maybe Milan looking to do something else because their standards are starting to resurge to higher levels?
Yeah, this is one of those things where you don't just sack Pioli to sack Pioli. If there was a manager out there that wanted to come to Milan that made sense, that could take this group to the next level, and in terms of tactically having a game plan to get Rafael more involved and not have him just hang out in the wing. Olivier Giroud, who will be probably departing for LA Galaxy, bringing in a top goal scorer.
LAFC, actually.
What
an
I
LA team.
Did I
LA
say
Galaxy.
Oh, sorry. LAFC.
You did.
I think that this is a very this group has a lot of potential. So when I look at Milan, it's a obviously an incredible club, a brilliant destination. But what manager would you, if you told me I could get De Zerbi and take out Pioli, then I would go out and get De Zerbi.
I thought
Ancelotti, maybe he comes back. Maybe he comes back to Milan. Maybe Jesse Marsch is not busy.
Yeah, if Jesse Marsch is available, I'm giving him a call.
I'll take that conversation. I will say this: looking at Pioli late in the match, when the game is a mess and the players are running all over the place, and Leao's waving his arms, and there's no real structure to what's going on, you could sense his frustration, right? You could sense the fact that
100%.
he was disappointed in the way that the team performed in this match, and I mean, that's for me. You can always accept losing if you feel like your team is organized, giving its all, doesn't back down. And, that's part of life, is like in big moments, you want your team to be able to respond. And for me, it's more important that they're present, that they're there, that they're organized, that they're going for the game in all the right ways. And for me, watching that game, I felt for Pioli because it just was a mess. The second half was a mess.
So
man.
Jesse, you're a manager. You see the Milan team; they're underperforming. Your quote unquote best player is largely ineffective and not involved. Do you move him centrally? What would you do to get Leao going? What would you do to get Christian Pulisic more space? Or, what would you change the formation, or is it just putting them higher up the pitch?
Listen, I thought earlier in the year when I was in the stadium and I was at some of the Champions League matches and watching some of the Serie A matches, I thought they were in a good way. Like they were organized. They had some good ideas with the ball. They were aggressive against the ball. They were more aggressive in transition. And I don't know if it's that they've played so many games and they've often used kind of the same group in every game, except for, maybe they rotate someone in the middle, one of the middle three a little bit. They've done some rotation there. And I don't know. There's something stale happening within the team. And then if you start to feel that as a manager, I do think you have to find a way to mix some things up. And maybe it's personnel, maybe it's formation, but you have to like recharge the group in a way that makes them understand how they can still achieve some big goals together. And again, like you're right. I agree. It has looked like it's deteriorated a little bit. And certainly tonight when they're, so much about players and people and teams that when it gets tough, that they crumble, right? Because this business for me is all about when it's tough, that you're strong, that you stick together. And even if you go down swinging. And that certainly was not a performance to go down swinging.
I look at some of the top managers, right? Like the top 5 managers of this season, right? If you look at Luis Enrique, Michel, Sebastian Yunus with Stuttgart, there are managers who have overperformed and stood out. You look at Xabi Alonso, right? Who in your mind would be a good fit? Like Unai Emery is another one. Aston Villa. Surely Milan would be interested in trying to get Unai Emery to leave Aston Villa, even if Aston Villa makes the Champions League. Is there a manager that you think would fit Milan best?
Listen, I don't think many managers are leaving the Premier League to go to the Serie A. Okay. De Zerbi, I don't think is going as big a club as AC Milan is. De Zerbi he's either going to Man U, Liverpool, Real Madrid, Barcelona. Like these kind of managers that you're mentioning, they're looking up at the possibilities of some big jobs. You could look around Italy and say, okay, are there some young managers that have done well and performed well, and are they ready? This is a little bit how Pioli arrived there. There is a little bit of a carousel in Italy, right? Like the classic Italian managers that have been from place to place, and they've managed several different clubs. So the one thing about AC Milan that I like is it's an international roster. So I think you don't have to play classic Italian football. I think you could be a little bit more aggressive. I think you could hire an international coach and you could test the waters to see, can we create a style of play that's a little bit more aggressive, and see if we can now look to dominate the league a little bit more, because I do think they have a good roster. And I think if they played a little bit more dynamic, they could have more success.
Yeah, big question, obviously, because whoever comes in or if Pioli stays, the futures of Christian Pulisic, who he looks okay. They obviously extended his contract by a year, but Yunus Musah, there's been some rumors about him going out on loan in the future. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Julian Lopetegui actually is a name that has been thrown out there to replace Pioli as well.
But I also think Pioli's a good manager. right? And actually, when I was around the team during Champions League, you could see that the team spirit was good. The guys liked being in the team. They liked playing for the manager. You know, it's just a shame that it's kind of disintegrated a little bit as the season's gone on.
So you tell me there's
Yeah,
a chance Musah could go to the Olympics?
That would be something. I would be all for that.
Maybe.
By the way,
Maybe.